I first saw her outside the bookstore, the one tucked between the pharmacy and the laundromat. She was sitting at a corner table, a coffee already half gone, her hand smoothing the napkin flat, folding it once, then unfolding it again. Not restless, exactly. More like someone keeping her hands busy while her thoughts were elsewhere. I had no reason to notice her. But I did. "Morning," I said when I walked past, because the table was near the door and it felt strange to ignore her. She looked up, surprised, then gave the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes right away. "You're always up early," she said. I froze for a second. "You notice?" "You walk past my door every morning," she said lightly, like it wasn't much, but her fingers folded the napkin again, just a little slower this time. Hard not to. I should have left it there. Bought my book, nodded, kept it ordinary. But something in the way she said it, gentle, almost apologetic, made me sit at the table across from her instead. She tilted her head. "You like reading?" I shrugged. "Mostly I just like the quiet here." That made her laugh, low and short. "Same." For a while, neither of us spoke. The hum of the espresso machine filled the silence. She tapped her finger against the edge of her cup, once, twice. My eyes kept catching on her hands. How careful they were, even in small movements. When the server brought her another coffee, she gestured toward me without looking. "Add whatever he's having." I blinked. "You didn't have to. I know," she said, finally meeting my eyes. But I wanted to. There was nothing flirtatious in it. Just kind. And maybe that's what made it feel heavier. After that morning, I kept noticing her. In the stairwell, carrying groceries balanced awkwardly against her hip. At the mailbox, tucking envelopes under her arm. Always with that slight pause before she spoke, like she was weighing the cost of each word. I started hesitating at my phone at night, typing her name in the search bar, then deleting it, my thumb hovering over the screen as if that could count as reaching out. I told myself it was ridiculous. She was older, lived a whole different life below mine. And yet, when I heard her lock click at odd hours, or her steps on the stairs, I found myself listening harder than I should. One evening, I came down with a package slip in my hand. She was already at the mailboxes, her hair loose from a long day. She glanced at me, then at the package in her arms. "They always leave yours with me," she said softly, handing it over. "Sorry for the trouble." "Not trouble." She shifted the strap of her bag. "I don't mind." It was such an ordinary exchange. But I walked back upstairs with my chest tighter, as if we'd said something much larger. That night, I stared at the ceiling, replaying the way her voice caught just before she handed me the package. The way she looked down quickly, not at me, but at the space between us, like she wasn't supposed to let the moment linger. I almost texted her. Just a simple thank you. My finger hovered over the keyboard for minutes, but the words stayed unsent. The next morning, when I passed her door, I slowed down. I don't know why. Maybe I wanted her to hear it. Maybe I wanted her to know I was thinking of her too. And later that day, as I sat in the cafe again, my phone buzzed. A single message. From her. "Next time, don't just walk past." I found her waiting by the mailboxes again a few days later. Not waiting for me, probably. But when she looked up and said, "You're late today," it sounded like she'd noticed the absence. "Class ran over," I said, shifting the strap of my backpack. "Professor likes to talk more than he teaches." That made her smile. Some things don't change. We walked up the stairs together, her steps slower than mine. At her door, she balanced a bag against her hip, struggling with the keys. Instinct made me reach over. "Here, let me." She hesitated, then let me take them. The brush of her fingers against mine was nothing. It should have been nothing. But I carried the warmth of it all the way inside when she pushed her door open and said, almost too casually, "Do you want tea?" I should have said no. Instead, I nodded. Her apartment smelled faintly of lemon and old books. She set water to boil, moving with quiet efficiency. I sat at the small table, noticing details I'd never seen from the outside. Photographs on a shelf, a faded throw over the couch. The kind of home built for one person, not two. She placed a mug in front of me and sat across, folding her hands around her own. For a moment, we just listened to the tick of the clock above the sink. "You remind me of my son," she said suddenly, then shook her head. "Not really. Just the age, maybe. He's away at college now. Feels strange, this quiet." I nodded, though something in me tightened. "I get that. My mom says the same since I left home." Her eyes flicked up at me, softening. You must be close. I shrugged. We talk. She worries too much. She smiled faintly, then looked down at her cup, tracing the rim with her thumb. I suppose I worry too much, too. The words hung there, heavier than they should have been. I wanted to ask more, but instead I stared at the steam curling off my tea, imagining how she must spend her evenings here. The television low, the kettle cooling on the stove, the silence pressing in. And I wondered, was that why she texted me? Or was it something else neither of us wanted to name? When I looked back, she was already watching me. Not boldly, just a quiet glance that lingered a second too long before she reached for the sugar. You don't take any? She asked. I shook my head. No. Just like this. She nodded, as if she'd expected it. And then, almost like she was speaking to herself, she said, some things are easier left plain. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable, but it wasn't safe either. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. When I stood to leave, she walked me to the door. My hand brushed the frame as I turned back. She was closer than I realized, her eyes catching mine. And before I could stop myself, I whispered, "Thanks for the tea." Her answer was simple, a soft touch against my sleeve, brief as breath. But it carried more weight than words ever could. It was raining when I saw her next. I ducked under the awning of the cafe, shaking out my hair, when she appeared beside me, holding an umbrella. "You'll get sick like that," she murmured. Before I could answer, she tilted the umbrella just enough to cover me too. Close enough that I could smell the faint citrus of her shampoo. Close enough that my arm brushed hers as we walked. We didn't go far, just back to the building. But each step felt stretched, deliberate. Like the silence between us was saying more than we could risk. At the stairwell, I slowed. She did too. "You're quiet," she said. I gave a small laugh. "So are you." Her mouth curved, not quite a smile. "Maybe that's why this feels." She stopped herself. Looked away. Never mind. I wanted to push. To ask what she meant. But the door opened suddenly, and one of her friends from down the hall stepped out, grocery bags in her arms. "Oh, hello." The woman's eyes darted between us, quick and sharp, before landing on her. "I didn't know you had company." "Just the neighbor," she said quickly. Too quickly, her tone polite but clipped. I felt something drop in my chest. The other woman nodded, forced a smile, and left. The stairwell felt smaller after that, like the air had shifted. She exhaled slowly, gripping the umbrella tighter. Yeah, I said, cutting her off. Of course. I should have gone upstairs. Instead, I followed her into her apartment when she left the door half open. Neither of us said it, but neither of us stopped it either. Inside, she busied herself with the kettle, not looking at me. Her shoulders were tight, her movements sharper than usual. "You don't have to explain," I said quietly. She froze. "Explain what?" "That I'm just the neighbor." Her hand stilled on the cupboard handle. For a moment, the only sound was the kettle beginning to hum. Finally, she turned, eyes steady but tired. "You are." The word should have ended it. But the way her voice caught on the last syllable, barely noticeable, made me doubt she believed them. I moved closer, slow, careful. She didn't step back. Her hands rested on the counter, fingers pressed flat, knuckles pale. When I stopped beside her, I could see the faint tremor in them. "I'm not trying to make this complicated," I whispered. Her eyes flicked to mine. "It already is." The kettle whistled then, too loud, breaking the moment. She turned away sharply, pouring water into the mugs. I stayed still, watching the steam rise, wondering if I'd imagined the way her breath had hitched just before. When she finally slid a cup toward me, our fingers almost touched on the handle. Almost. I looked up. She looked back. And for one suspended second, I thought, if I leaned just a little closer. But she turned away, her voice low, almost breaking. "Don't." For a week, I didn't see her. Not at the mailbox. Not in the stairwell. Not in the cafe where she sometimes sat by the window, folding napkins and drinking her coffee too slowly. At first, I thought it was chance. Then, I realized it wasn't. I tried to convince myself not to notice. I buried myself in classes, sat longer in the library, walked different routes home. But at night, the silence below my apartment felt louder than anything else. Then one evening, as I was heading upstairs, I heard voices from her door. A man's, older, familiar somehow. I slowed, not meaning to, catching fragments. "You should have told me. It's not your business anymore." The door closed sharply. Steps retreated. I stood frozen, pretending to adjust the strap of my bag. When I finally moved, she opened the door just enough to slip her head out. Her eyes landed on me instantly. "You heard?" she asked. Not angry, not surprised. Just tired. I nodded once. She sighed, leaning against the frame. "My ex. He still thinks he gets a say." I wanted to ask what about. Instead, I just said, "I'm sorry." She gave a faint smile. "Don't be. It's mine to carry." But the way she closed the door after, softly but firmly, told me she didn't want me carrying it with her. After that night, she was different. Not cold exactly, just careful. If we met in the stairwell, her greetings were short. If we ended up in the cafe at the same time, she chose a table farther away. Once, I almost sat beside her anyway. But when she glanced up, her eyes flicked to the empty chair and then away again. That look was enough to stop me. I started skipping the cafe, started walking faster past her door in the mornings. I told myself it was fine, that it was only a few conversations, a few cups of tea, nothing more. But in quiet moments, I caught myself replaying the almosts, the brush of her sleeve, the silence just before she said don't. One night, restless, I typed out a message. Just, "Are you okay?" I stared at the words until the screen blurred. My thumb hovered over send. But I couldn't do it. Because what if she didn't answer? Or worse, what if she did, but only to draw another line I wasn't ready to hear? I deleted it. The next morning, I walked past her door, not slowing this time. I told myself not to look. But when I reached the street, I glanced up at her window. The curtain shifted, just slightly, like someone had been there, and then stepped back. And in that small, unfinished moment, I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused, like life forgot to finish the sentence. It happened on a Tuesday evening. Ordinary, the kind that disappears unless something interrupts it. I was coming back late, the stairwell dim and smelling faintly of rain that had leaked through the cracked window. Her door was half open, a strip of warm light spilling across the landing. I almost kept walking, but then I heard her voice, low, strained. "Can you help me for a second?" I stopped, pushed the door wider. She was in the kitchen, standing on a chair, trying to reach the top shelf. A box balanced precariously in her hands. I crossed the room before I thought. "You'll fall." She froze, then laughed softly, embarrassed. "I used to do this all the time. Feels different now." I took the box from her, set it down on the counter. The moment stretched as she stepped down carefully, brushing past me in the small space. Close enough that I felt the edge of her sleeve against mine. "Thanks," she murmured, not looking at me. We stood there, the silence heavy. The ticking clock on the wall sounded louder than it should. "Finally," I said, "you've been distant." Her hands stilled on the countertop. She kept her eyes down. "It's better this way." "Better for who?" She looked up then. For the first time in weeks, really looked at me. Her eyes were tired, but there was something else beneath it, something she'd been holding back. "You're too young," she said quietly. "And I'm—" She broke off, shaking her head. "People talk. My son, if he knew." I swallowed hard. "I'm not asking for forever. My voice faltered. I started again, softer. "I just don't want to pretend I don't notice you." Her breath caught, barely audible. She leaned back against the counter, pressing her palms flat like she needed the surface to steady herself. "You think this is simple," she whispered. "No," I said. "I think it's complicated. But that doesn't mean it's nothing." The words hung between us. She turned away slightly, as if hiding, then let out a laugh that wasn't quite a laugh. "You make it sound easy to choose." "It's not easy," I said. "But maybe it's harder not to." Her shoulders rose, then fell. Slowly, she turned back toward me. The distance between us felt fragile, like one wrong word could crack it. I waited, not moving, not pushing. Finally, she stepped closer, just enough that her hand brushed mine on the counter. A touch so light it could have been accidental. Except she didn't pull away. Her voice was barely a whisper. "You don't know what you're asking." I met her gaze. "Then tell me." She didn't answer. Instead, she exhaled, long and quiet, and let her fingers close over mine. It wasn't a kiss. It wasn't a confession. It was smaller than that. A hand held, a silence shared. And when she finally spoke, it was only one word. "Okay." Weeks slipped into months. The intensity of that night faded, but it didn't vanish. It softened, like colors left out in the sun, muted but still present. I still heard her door click in the mornings, her steps timed almost perfectly with mine. 8:47 a.m., like always. Some days she'd nod as I passed, others she'd say nothing at all. But even in silence, something held. We stopped circling each other in cafes and stairwells. Instead, we started sharing space in quieter ways. A grocery bag carried up 2 flights without her asking. A thermos of tea she left outside my door when she knew I was up late studying. Me knocking once on hers when the kettle whistled too loudly for too long. It wasn't romance in the way I thought it would be. It wasn't constant, wasn't consuming. It was something steadier. One Sunday, she invited me to sit on the bench outside the building. No reason, no pretext. We just sat there, coffee in my hand, tea in hers, watching the slow drift of people walking by. I used to sit here with my son when he was little, she said, eyes on the street. He'd ask 100 questions about everything. Stop signs, dogs, why the sky looked different at night. I never had good answers. You didn't have to, I said quietly. He just wanted you there. She turned then, studying me for a long moment, like she was measuring something she hadn't named yet. Finally, she smiled, small, tired, but real. That was when I realized what we'd found wasn't about stolen moments or near confessions. It was about showing up, again and again, in the smallest ways. Life didn't change overnight. She still worked long hours, still folded her napkin at the cafe when thoughts weighed on her. I still hovered too long over unsent messages. But bit by bit, the distance between us wore down. One evening, I found her waiting by the door, a grocery bag on the floor between her feet. You've been walking past every morning, she said, echoing her words from that very first day. But lately, you've been slower. I laughed, rubbing the back of my neck. Maybe I was hoping you'd notice. Her hand brushed mine as she picked up the bag. This time, she didn't pull away. We went inside together, the sound of her kettle starting up filling the quiet. I thought about all the things we hadn't said, all the things we might never put into words. And I realized it didn't matter. Because sometimes love doesn't arrive with fireworks or confessions. Sometimes it slips in quietly, through repeated mornings and the weight of an extra cup poured without asking. As she set my mug in front of me, black coffee, just the way I'd told her months ago, I caught her eye. Neither of us spoke. We didn't need to. And that silence felt like the truest thing we'd ever shared. Did this story stay with you? What kind of quiet, real love stories do you want to hear next?